Welcome to our fantasy football demo. This is Matt Mills presenting for Adam Johnson, Sean Mosley, and Brian C. Hung. Our tool allows you to compare two different fantasy football players to decide who to start or who to sit for your team that week. We'll start our comparison with Matt Ryan and Cam Newton, both very good quarterbacks. If you just looked at ESPN's projections, you would see that Cam Newton was projected to score 20 points in the week, while Matt Ryan was only projected to score 12. On ESPN, this is all you would get, and you would say, let's start Cam Newton. Our system allows you to view other information about their game, including who they're playing, whether or not they're injured, if they're home or away, and other information. You can also view histograms about past performance to view how many points they scored in certain weeks, and also past performance on specific statistics, such as passing yards, passing touchdowns, and attempts. The hues represent the 50th, 75th, and 95th percentile of statistics, with the darker hues being the 50th percentile and the lightest being the 95th percentile of past performances for that statistic. So, for example, Matt Ryan has scored at least one touchdown in 50% of his games through the air. The big difference between these players are the rushing statistics. Cam Newton obviously is very more mobile than Matt Ryan and seems to get a lot more rushing touchdowns and rushing yards through the air. We can use our tool to examine this relationship even further and look at the defenses they're facing. Both Cam Newton and Matt Ryan are facing a top 5 defense. So if we examine only games against their top opponents, our charts reflect that change in selection. Now we see that both their performances are consistent, but Matt Ryan throws for many more yards and passing attempts in games against top opponents than Cam Newton, while Cam Newton is still very reliant on his rushing statistics. In 75% of his games, he rushes for more than 30 yards. Knowing this information could help warn the user that if Cam Newton's rushing performance goes away, his fantasy points might not be as consistent as it has been. And again, that's actually what happened this week. Against Seattle, they limited Cam Newton's rushing attempts, and Matt Ryan's consistent passing performance carried him to score more points this week. But ESPN's projection tool wouldn't have allowed you to examine that relationship. We can compare different players across different positions as well, this time comparing Kelvin Benjamin and T.Y. Hilton, two very good receivers on the year. Both players score consistent points. T.Y. Hilton has had one huge game, which we can see in our raw histogram, while Kelvin Benjamin is pretty consistent. However, the differences really come between Kelvin Benjamin's receiving touchdowns and T.Y. Hilton's receiving touchdowns. Kelvin Benjamin appears to score many more touchdowns, and we can view this further using our scatter plot. We can see that in 5 games, Kelvin Benjamin has scored a receiving touchdown, but only once has T.Y. Hilton scored. If we want to ignore the games where Kelvin Benjamin and T.Y. Hilton have scored a touchdown, we can use our scatter plot. Now we see that T.Y. Hilton's performance is very consistent even when he doesn't score a receiving touchdown, while Kelvin Benjamin seems to kind of drop off and he doesn't score many points. And we can use our projectiles to see that in 50% of his games, T.Y. Hilton gets at least 85 receiving yards even when he doesn't score a touchdown. To remove the filters, you can click on the scatter plot or press the Reset All Filters button. In addition, we can use the filters at top to view games against only top or bottom defenses. Here we're limiting T.Y. Hilton's games to bottom half defenses, while Kelvin Benjamin to only defenses in the top half of the league. The scatter plot is updated to show that only T.Y. Hilton's games are in the bottom half and Kelvin Benjamin's are in the top half. You can use these to examine any further relationships the user might wish to view. We also see injury data for T.Y. Hilton. Our projections currently take into account the fact that T.Y. Hilton is injured, which is why him and Kelvin Benjamin have a very similar projection curve. When we want to look at historic data for when T.Y. Hilton was probable as he was this week, we can see that he actually hasn't had a game where he's been probable yet, so we don't have much to go on. We can use our projection system that the team developed to examine what happens when T.Y. Hilton would be healthy or not. Currently, he's listed as probable, but when we remove a piece of injury information, his projection curve updates to reflect that he might score more points if he's not injured. So if you think his injury is very slight and he's still going to play, you can ignore that to view the projections. Our tool will allow the user to compare players across different positions if one would like to compare a running back to a wide receiver or running back to tight end. We'll continue to compare 2 running backs with Matt Forte and Jamaal Charles, 2 very good performers on the season. Our tool allows comparison of players even where there's almost no wrong answer. Starting either of these players would be good, but we can examine how their performances matter between different statistics using our tool. If we want to know what happens when Matt Forte carries the ball a lot, in this case his 75th percentile of games, we click on that bar in the bar chart. Those points are then highlighted in the scatter plot, so you can see that when Matt Forte carries the ball a lot, he's going to score his points and get his due, which is a good thing to know. The statistic doesn't separate the player very much, then selecting the bar will simply select all points in the scatter plot, for instance with Jamaal Charles and receiving touchdowns. However, if we view carries, we can see that when Jamaal Charles gets less than 50% of his average carry amount, he's not going to score that many points. The user can also select different bars for different players or players at the same time. If we want to look at when Matt Forte and Jamaal Charles carry the ball in their least amounts, all points are highlighted. The team hopes that this visualization tool will allow fantasy football team owners to select the best player based on the projection factors that they care about, not just some one number system that ESPN produces that they have to blindly trust. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.